My name is Shay, and you are watching Reviews by Shay. So, today I will be reviewing the 1964 film Dr. Strangelove, which was directed by Stanley Kubrick. This movie is a satire. The entire thing is a satire. It's also labeled as a black comedy. There was a lot to this movie. I actually really enjoyed it. I thought it was quite hilarious. I chose this in part because I was in the Air Force, so it was funny to watch a movie that kind of made fun of that, made fun of the military. And so basically there's this Air Force general called Jack Ripper who sets an attack on Russia because he blames the Soviet Union for his impotence. And he talks a lot about his bodily fluids, which we find out in the movie is because when he had sex with a woman, he lost his essence. So he sets this nuclear attack in motion, unauthorized. And basically what follows is a series of events of the president trying to stop this attack. So we're introduced to this doomsday device during the course of the movie. And basically Dr. Strangelove explains that it's this device that is going to automatically be triggered to go off if there is attack, and there's no way to stop it. And it's just funny to me because the movie's called Dr. Strangelove, and Dr. Strangelove doesn't really play a big part in the movie. Yeah, he has some pieces, but he's not like a main part of the movie. First of all, the aesthetics of this movie are amazing. It is in black and white, which is interesting considering that color film was available during this time. So to me, that made it a little bit easier to focus on some of the other things going on, such as the shadows and the light versus the dark and the angles, because there are angles used. There's cutting back and forth between scenes. The scene with the telephone conversation cut back and forth. The scenes in the war room cut between everyone that's around the table. And that was honestly my favorite set in the movie because it's this big circular room and it's called the war room, so you see the maps and you see all that around, so you can see the attack in progress. But what was interesting is that it reminded me of a poker table, a round poker table. And it was like everybody was trying to play their own hands and get the upper hand and all that. Of course, the president is in there, and his name, Merkin Muffley, definitely refers to like that feminine side and that timidness, which speaks a lot to what the gender roles were of the 60s. And each of the characters represented failure in some way. Like the president had the failure to assert himself. Dr. Strangelove is, in a wheelchair, so that's a physical failure. Turgensen, failed to be able to finish his relations with his secretary, which is the only female in the entire movie, and she has a very, very short scene, and she's in a bikini in it, so, she's kind of there as the sex symbol, and, he has to rush out before they can actually have sex. This movie was just one sexual innuendo after another, both with dialogue and visual. So dialogue, you get a lot of they said penetrating a lot, but there was a lot of visual stuff too. The biggest one I noticed was, of course, Major Kong at the very end of the movie, like riding the rocket down into, explosion. And of course, he's facing the camera, so the rocket looks like it's this, huge penis, basically. And then you see the explosion, which is supposed to be the climax of the movie. So it was just sexual innuendo after the other. I think, though, that what the movie does best is it shows that power struggle between politicians and the military that is still relevant today. I got a kick out of it because I was in the military for, almost 10 years. So I lived through it. I lived through the, living by rules and regulations. And the funniest thing that I thought in the movie was when they were talking about, like, the military issued items and 7 packs of gum and 3 lipsticks and 3 nylons. So I know at the time, in that age in the movie, it was, in case that the soldiers had to disguise themselves as women. But to me, what it reminded me of was some of the ridiculous items that the military does issue soldiers and the excess that it does. But overall, this movie, I can see why it has had an impact, and nobody dared to make fun of the military or make fun of the president or make fun of those in authority. And here comes this movie that's highly controversial to that time, and it does make fun of the weaknesses of everything, and this movie really capitalizes on that and what happens if a person who is drunk with power makes the wrong decision. A certain kind of power in the wrong hands can really truly destroy everything. And while this movie is a comedy and it is funny, it still has that very serious message to it. And I, for one, am very thankful that didn't happen. And it was just a phenomenal film. And I am very glad I chose this one to watch this week.